amazing day planned for you all. I'm going to do a very brief rundown of the festivities that we have for today, and then I'm going to turn everything over to our Madam Secretary. So I just want to go over briefly again the schedule. Our merchandising booth is going to open at 8:30 from 9:15. We have two amazing speakers for y'all today from Homeland Security Investigations. And then after their presentation, we're going to go ahead and start judging the yearbooks. They had to be in yesterday at 4 p.m. I hope everybody was able to get them in on the side table. And then at 11:15, we're going to do the Criminal Justice Knowledge Scholarship Test. Then from there at noon, the merchandising booth is going to open again from 3:30 p.m. And then there's going to be a student luncheon that's going to be available from 12:30 to 1:15. And then the infamous College Quiz Bowl. That's going to happen from 1. Yes, that's going to happen from 1:30 to 3:15. And please note that it's going to be in Salon K. I know the program has Salon G, but it's going to be back in here. Then from 1:30 to 3:15, we're going to have a chapter advisor meeting. It's going to be question and answer. I do implore everybody to come. It's going to be an opportunity where you're going to be able to ask questions, and you're going to be able to get your questions answered. You're going to have your questions answered by Associate Director Adrena Jensen and also headquarters. So please, I implore everybody to come. And then after that, from 3:30 to 5 p.m., we're going to have a presentation and judging of the chapter goals, the theme of the year, which will be leadership, service, and unity, and also the Instagram challenge. So without further ado, I would like to turn this over to our Madam Secretary, Surchin. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to present Michelle Ludwig, Victim Assistant Specialist with Homeland Security Investigation, Philadelphia, and also a Special Agent, Cerminaro, Homeland Security Investigation, member of Homeland Security Investigation Recruiting Team, Philadelphia. Victim Assistant Specialist Michelle Ludwig is responsible for supporting victims of crime throughout the state of Philadelphia and Delaware. Michelle works with victims of all crimes, but is assigned to the SPEC group. Michelle is a former social work supervisor with the City of Philadelphia, Department of Human Services, began her career in child welfare in 2004, and spent 14 years investigating child sexual abuse, and later became a supervisor in the Critical Investigation Unit, supervising fatality, near fatality, human trafficking, and high media cases. Michelle was instrumental in creating Philadelphia Department of Human Services response to human trafficking. Michelle assists in the creation of the policy for response for child welfare professionals. Michelle was also involved and assists in the creation of Working to Restore Adolescents Power Forum, which is part of Family Courts, serving both dependent and delinquent children in the City of Philadelphia. Michelle was worked collectively with other MTT partners and has been instrumental as a team member, trainer, and advocate for the safety and well-being of victims throughout the city. Michelle's hometown has always been Philadelphia. She is a 2003 bachelor's and 2010 MSW graduate for Temple University. Let's give a round of applause. I would like to present a Special Agent, Cerminaro. Lauren is a Special Agent with Homeland Security Investigations who started her career in law enforcement with Homeland Security Investigations in 2006. Special Agent Cerminaro has experience conducting investigations regarding the sexual exploitation of children, missing children, financial crimes, and document fraud investigation, as well as an additional Homeland Security investigative areas. She was a member of the Pennsylvania Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force and is part of the Student Volunteer Internship Program of Homeland Security Investigation, Philadelphia. A Special Agent Cerminaro holds a Bachelor of Liberal Arts degree in Criminal Justice from Temple University and is an Alpha Phi Sigma member, Chi Alpha Epsilon Academic Honor Society member.
anybody here that's actually from Philly? All right, so for everybody else, probably the second or third most important thing you're gonna learn here in Philly is dopers. If you don't leave saying it, don't come back, okay? Secondly, this is probably my only opportunity to ever be among so many honor students, so thank you for this opportunity. As said, I'm Michelle, I'm Victim Assistance Specialist with Homeland Security. Just going to go through a quick presentation regarding human trafficking that includes both sex and labor. And we'll start off Homeland Security investigations. We are the principal investigative arm for the United States Department of Homeland Security. We're responsible for investigating, and we can bring prosecution to over 400 statutes. We consist of more than 10,000 special agents, criminal analysts, forensic interview specialists, victim assistance specialists, and support personnel. So we have a wide group of different professionals that make up HSI. SAC Philadelphia, which covers the state of Pennsylvania and covers the state of Delaware. Our Blue campaign is the voice and reason of our efforts for human trafficking. We like to bring awareness and education as a unified front, and on there is our hyperlink for the Blue campaign. If you ever wanted to host any type of events back at your school, within your own chapters, things like that, you could go there, I'll send you plenty of swag. If you came in through the airport, or when you're leaving through the airport, look around, you probably should see Blue campaign, swag in the airports and bathrooms. If you don't, call me, especially in Philly. I'm going to give you guys this number at the very end, but there's also, these are the numbers for the National Trafficking Hotline and how to report suspected human trafficking. So there's a big difference between human smuggling and human trafficking. Human smuggling is a transportation-based offense. You enter voluntarily. People want to come to the United States, right? So that's smuggling. Trafficking is exploitive-based. It's not a voluntary situation, but what I would like everybody to keep in mind is a lot of times smuggling becomes trafficking because people are brought here under the thoughts and impressions that they're going to come, get an education, go to school, have a better life, but once they get here, they're often forced into an exploitive-based situation, so then they become a trafficking victim. But there is a difference between smuggling and trafficking. The definition for human trafficking is the recruitment, the harboring, and the exploitation of people being brought into the United States or throughout the United States through the use of you need either force, fraud, or coercion. And it's usually done for purposes of economic or sexual exploitation. And the purpose of an organization reliant on long-term exploitation to continue profits. So it's often done in exchange for something, whether it be that labor or sexual in favor. However, you're often not paid or compensated for it the way you should be. There are many different types of human trafficking victims. Some dynamics are the same, while others may be different, but there is sex versus labor, domestic versus international, and juvenile versus adult. A lot of people envision human trafficking as you come in through a cargo ship in a bin or a freight delivery, and you're brought here. It happens right in your own backyards, regardless of what city or state you're from. It does not always have to be an international crime, and it is not always international based. It is domestic, and it happens right here. For those of you guys that are not from Philly, there's when I tell you that we get at least 5 leads a month of particularly juveniles that are being forced into this, and they are born and raised right here in Philadelphia. And that number is what comes over to our side, for somebody to run it by us or to talk to us about it. But Philly PD and the local departments are hit much more than that. For sex trafficking, it is the recruitment, harboring, transporting, providing, or obtaining a person for commercial sex acts that is induced by force, fraud, or coercion. So if you have an adult, there has to be force, fraud, or coercion. The only time that you don't need force, fraud, or coercion is if the victim is under 18. No minor can ever consent to sexual exploitation in exchange for anything. So again, if you're under 18, you do not need force, fraud, or coercion. Labor trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transporting, providing, or obtaining a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. And it's usually done for the subjection of involuntary servitude, bondage, slavery, debt. I'll give you guys a quick example. Earlier when I said about the difference between smuggling and trafficking, if the child, and I'm using a child because this is a case that we've recently had, and we're currently actually it's been indicted, it's being prosecuted at the federal level. But there was a 10-year-old child from Guatemala that was smuggled over here, right? She was coming to meet her sister who was going to take care of her, send her to school, get her medical care, meet her basic needs, like a child's basic needs. That's what her parents thought they were sending her over here for. She got here and then was forced into labor trafficking from her own family unit, working 14, 15-hour days out. Chester County is the mushroom capital of the world, and there is alleged to be a lot of labor trafficking victims out there. However, this child was forced to work many, many hours on these farms, sometimes using different identities to split the day so that when they're not even paying you what even minimum wage in Pennsylvania is, they don't have to pay them overtime on the little amount of money that they are paying her. So she's working 12, 15-hour days, not going to school, not getting an education, not getting medical care. But that is a situation where smuggling became trafficking, and because she is such a young child, there is no way to ever even, she would never came in being tracked, right? So never going to school, so we didn't know she was missing school. So that's how easy it is to really exploit children into labor trafficking. And I want to stand corrected, it's actually being prosecuted at the state level by the Office of Attorney General, not the federal level. Where trafficking can occur: brothels, escort services, bars and strip clubs, online. This says Backpage. I'm clearly showing my age up here. Backpage was a site that's been shut down. I'm sure you guys have heard about it or familiar with it. Social media is huge. It is huge today in the promoting and the arranging of sex trafficking for both minor and adult victims. Street and truck stops, particularly in Philly, we do have two areas that are well known for sex work. In the Kensington section, Kensington Ave, and then in the Germantown section, there's Germantown and Hunting Park area that is also known. Forced labor trafficking is sweatshops, construction sites, restaurants and custodial work, commercial agriculture, and domestic maids and nannies. So what is labor trafficking? It's a form of modern-day slavery that exists in the United States and around the world. It often includes recruiters, contractors, employers, and others. It's actually like a whole mass operation, and it typically includes all of those because they work together to exploit victims in this and make them work against their will. They often make false promises of high-paying jobs or education, travel opportunities, to lure people into these terrible conditions, and the reality is far different than what was promised. And it generally includes working long hours for little to no pay, often includes really terrible living conditions, sometimes multiple blankets, mattresses. It's nothing that these victims were promised or told was going to be done once they got here or got to their final destination. And vulnerable populations are often targeted. Another big thing with labor trafficking is when the arrangement for these people to come from their countries or where they're from to the United States, or to whatever city or state they're going to if they are U.S. residents, is often their documents are withheld. And that is huge. So when we talk about vulnerable populations, especially in labor trafficking cases, we're often talking about people who don't speak the language, are not familiar with the norms or the cultures of our society, have no family and friends here, they're often isolated, they have no money, What they came with typically is their clothes on their back and maybe their documents or wherever they're coming from, and they're often taken from them and withheld. There's also a price to pay. When you get smuggled into the country, it's done through what sometimes we call coyote. So a coyote will then help get that person across into our country or whatever country they're going to, and they'll say it's $7,000. Fine, the family can pay the $7,000. I can assure you that when they get to this side, that debt sometimes doubles or triples. So it's a vicious cycle. You're never going to get out of debt. So you're always going to owe something. And all of these people together work collectively. So there's no escaping it. So vulnerable populations are often targeted because they have nowhere to go. And the one thing they're not going to do is talk to law enforcement, because you should never trust law enforcement, is what they're taught at the very beginning. Sex trafficking. It is the fastest growing crime in the United States, and it is a $169.9 billion a year business. It comes second to drug trafficking, and it has a continuous quantity of victims. They're often invisible, often difficult to track and stop, and the demand is always there. If you're a drug dealer and you have 7 bundles of dope or you have 6 kilos of coke, right? Once you sell that, you're out. You have to go back to your supplier and get more drugs. If you sell people, you never run out. You could sell the same person 6 times a day. Let them get a couple hours sleep, a hot shower, and then you could sell them 6 more times the next day. You never run out of your demand like you do in drugs. So it's super easy, and I'm using that, I mean, it's easier to sell people than it is drugs. Common recruiting tactics are model agency offers, recording studio. This is what's like targeting younger adults. It's like they want to be a model, they're going to be a rapper, they're going to be a singer, promises of fame, hang out at malls, schools, fast food. One, I'm going to tell you that I didn't make this PowerPoint and it's a little bit outdated, so I can assure you that when you see on Facebook, like the white van at the mall chasing people, I mean, you should be skeptical, but I'm not sure it's a whole truck full of human trafficking victims. Shopping, beauty treatments, love and hope, contacting ads online. I will say in the last 5 years, Instagram, TikTok, Discord, Snapchat, that's where it's at. I mean, it's where the faces are being put out there. It's so easy to slide into a DM. I mean, in Snapchat alone, you're adding, Snapchat suggests who they think I know, right? And like user contacts you may know. Next thing you know, you're in a group ad. If you're vulnerable and you're feeling like you're having not a great day and you're feeling not great about yourself and someone tells you you're gorgeous, you're going to listen, and then it spirals. And I know I sound like the 46-year-old I am. You guys are a little bit older, but be careful on social media. And if you have children, nieces, nephews, be careful on social media. If social media was around when I was in college, I probably would not have a federal job. And that is the truth. Any Temple people here? We're in Philadelphia and there's no temple? All right. Physical indicators of possible trafficking. Lack of ID, I talked about that, especially it's prominent in labor trafficking. Physical injuries, bruises, signs of abuse. Disease. This is big for anyone that ends up in any type of job where you're working with the public, if you're taking people to hospitals. I talk about this all the time when I do my trainings in hospitals and clinic settings. Repetitive STDs, STIs, trichomonas, gonorrhea, chlamydia, it's often signs. I'm not saying that everybody who has these is a trafficking victim, but what I'm saying is if you've been in the hospital 6 times in the last year with these issues, and your brother's with you, or your cousin's with you, or someone's answering the questions for you, and not all PIPs are male. There are females. So this is like super important, especially when there's only somebody like with you is also answering questions and you present like this, it's something to always, that always will trigger a red flag for trafficking. Drug and alcohol addiction, I talked about in Philly, the Kensington section. I will say to you that the 98% of the sex workers that are down there probably don't have pimps. Maybe at some point they did. Some do, but it's very rare because that is done typically to support their addiction. Malnutrition, poor health conditions is extremely prominent in labor trafficking cases. Scarring by violence, branding or tattooing, abandoning children, low self-esteem, humiliated, degraded, suicide attempts. These are physical addictions, indicators. I'm going to say this talks about branding or tattooing. Back in the day, it would be like, people would have tattoos, but like daddy's girl, or these are just examples, like money signs, or, something that branded them. Since the world is evolving every single day, something that we're seeing really, I've seen a choice in the last probably year, are invisible tattoos. And they can only be picked up by a forensic lamp or a black lamp. So if somebody comes in for a sexual assault examination, that is how we found both of them. And they were both the same tattoo, and they were both from a pimp out of New York. And that's how he was branding his girls, was with invisible tattoos. Control tactics used by traffickers, debt bondage, I talked about that, withholding money, withholding documents, isolation, threat of exposure, distrust in the police, use and threat of violence. There are different types of pimps. There's ones that love you so much, you're amazing, like that's a finesse pimp. A guerrilla pimp is somebody who fears you, who you fear because they shame you, they belittle, they assault you, they degrade you. A lack of knowledge, where to get help. Any method necessary to separate victims from society and culture and keep them on a constant movement is probably one of the biggest techniques used by traffickers. So victim dynamics and common challenges. Not all victims are the same, and not all victims want to be rescued. That is super important to keep in mind. They distrust the legal system. They do not trust law enforcement. They're oftentimes uncooperative or hostile. They have an ambivalence about the offender, like they're conflicted, their loyalties. I will say, and I'll get to this too, that a lot of kids, and I'm speaking Philadelphia only right now, but a lot of the children that are victims of child trafficking come from the child welfare system. So when we say there's a loyalty and they're conflicted, a lot of these kids don't have family, they don't have parents, they're what we call dependent children. They're without care. So they're in the foster care system, they're in group homes, and they're in emergency shelters. So if somebody is going to come pick you up, take you to get something, maybe get your nails done, you're going. And it's often going to be reminded to you that I took care of you, or I helped you. So their loyalty is way better than anything that their loyalty to that pimp is so strong because that pimp has done anything to make them feel a little more human than sitting in a group home that serves 3 meals a day that's barely edible at times, and I'm just being honest. They're reluctant to talk because there's fear of consequences, shame, lack of trust, threats and isolation, fear of unknown, complexity, and loyalty to the perpetrator. In labor trafficking cases, the fear of deportation is huge, especially in today's world. So nobody's trusting law enforcement. I will tell you, I know that we are Homeland Security. If a victim is a victim, they're a victim. And, we try to urge, we really could assist if you're a victim of any federal crime. Domestic sex trafficking victims, like I talked about Philly, often from runaway homes, they're throwaways, they're emotionally vulnerable, high poverty levels, family substance, sexual, and physical abuse. They're often targeted and grouped by a pimp. I will tell you that the guys that run the people, I should stop saying guys, but the people that run the city of Philly, who are well known for doing this, know where to go. They sit outside the youth emergency shelters. They sit outside the group homes. And a lot of group homes say as long as you're back within 72 hours, you don't lose your bed. So if you leave on a Friday at 9, you're back by Sunday at 5, you're golden, and you just had a good weekend. And I'm saying good loosely, not according to the victim, but in what they're being told. Addicted to drugs, survival and submission. 80 to 90% of victims, of human trafficking victims, have a history of child sexual abuse. 80 to 90%. And 13 is the average age of entry into commercial sex exploitation. I did not write prostitution, and I have to take that out, and I say it every presentation, and I forget. International trafficking victims, we kind of went over this, don't speak English, they're unfamiliar, they don't self-identify, they blame themselves for the predicaments that they're in. They're unaware of their rights, and they may have been intentionally misinformed about their rights. And they fear for the safety of their families in their home countries, who are often threatened. Because remember, I explained it's a whole network of people, especially in labor trafficking. You have traffickers on both ends who have access to sometimes their kids or their elderly parents. Contacts with victims, it's locating and contacting a victim. Our first and foremost should always be safety and security of that victim. Physical safety, physical and mental health, and their basic needs. Victim statements are crucial for the prosecution of these cases, but you're never going to get to a good statement if you don't lay the founding work first, which really is meeting that victim where they are and their safety, physical, mental health, and their basic needs are met first. So when we go out, and I'm often with our agents when we encounter victims, I mean, sure, we'll have a quick conversation, the agents will, but even our agents, their first and only priority that night is that victim's safety. It's not about interviews, it's not about, we'll get to that, but we need to get you good first before we can even consider putting you through such a traumatizing thing of reliving all of your trauma and lived experiences. Don't expect victims to be happy about a rescue, and never expect them to initially recognize that they're victims. They're going to lie before they tell the truth. And that comes with the shame and the guilt of such, of the verbiage that's associated with it. Like, we're shifting as a society to say human trafficking, which is why I said, like, I need to take prostitution out of there, because even 10 years ago, we would say, like, well, you're a prostitute, but now you have to change your verbiage so that we can begin the education part of it, that you are a victim of trafficking if somebody is making you do this work or benefiting from you doing this work. We often talked about the children, and I talked about like group shelters and runaways and stuff like that. I will tell you this, it's very rarely that they're paid for their sex acts. It's very rare that they're paid. The person who's like helping facilitate this, the pimp, the bottom, any of them, they're the ones that are paid. But in exchange for that sex, if that child has a place to stay, or is provided shelter, or is provided food, that is human trafficking, because there was an exchange of something for a sex act, and they're a minor. So that constitutes human trafficking. In Pennsylvania alone, we changed our Child Protective Service law, and these cases are now investigated by child welfare as well, because an adult is having an exchange of sexual favor for food, money, shelter, clothing, sneakers, any of that under Pennsylvania state law encompasses child sex trafficking. Expect challenges. Definitely, culture and interpreters are our biggest challenge, because it's hard enough that nobody wants to trust, but now we have to trust through like a third party because you can't even understand what I'm saying. Victims with ties or feelings to the trafficker, and there's high media interest. Human trafficking is a new thing in the last 10 years. You often see it on news, human trafficking ring was busted. So there's always media presence, especially when it's like multiple people being arrested or being indicted. It often brings media. You have to allow victims the opportunity to make as many control choices as possible. Where to sit, who they want in the room. Let them ask questions. I always say it's so silly, but if I'm like, are you hungry? Have you eaten? Now, do you want mayonnaise or mustard? Do you want fries or pizza? I don't decide for victims. Let them decide, because you're giving them back a little bit of control that's going to let them learn that they can take full control. Use your manners, be mindful of word choices, avoid prostitute, as I have it in my presentation. I'm telling you to avoid it. Consider cultural factors. Always avoid conveying judgment towards the victims, target, or other parties involved. Even though we're someone who, when I say we Homeland Security, like, we want the bad guys off the street. We want to see a world where children are not being sold for sex. We want to see a world where adults make their own choices, and if they do, they fully profit from those choices, right? Not somebody else. But the people that are doing this with our victims have been the ones that provide shelter, despite how it was provided. So your verbiage is super important. It's super important to take that into consideration when you're talking, because we know that those people have done bad things to vulnerable people, but the vulnerable people don't see that yet. So it's super important to watch your judgment, unless you are a survivor of it. You can't relate to that victim's experiences, and trying to do so will really make you look like a fool. Never assume you have all the answers, because you don't. And obviously arguing with the victim is, one of our initial interaction tips that we try not to do. I talked about shelter, housing, medical care, and food. These are the physiological needs that always come first with the victim. Sleep, basic hygiene, clothing. A lot of times if I'm going out on a warrant with one of our agents, or we're doing a victim ID op in a hotel, my car is stacked with hygiene products, sweatshirts, sports bras, comfy socks, because a lot of times as you experience like the ads that are being posted, it's in lingerie, it's uncomfortable clothing, and they definitely don't want to leave the hotel in that outfit and go to a police station or go to a child advocacy center or go to a hospital. So that's something super that I always try to have in my car, and along with toothbrushes and basic hygiene, things that we all take for granted. Immediate safety is one of our, absolutely, I keep talking about that. And for international victims, stabilization in our country, which lets me go into resources and partnering with the feds. My job is to really assist our agents with victim issues. But if we have a victim, I'm going to go to it, I'll come back. Immigration relief is huge, especially for our labor trafficking victims. And when I say a victim is a victim, we talk about stabilization in the country. Continued presence allows any victim of human trafficking to remain in the United States legally while we continue our investigation, and also provides work authorization so they can also work legally and make money that they deserve to make, right? Like it's minimum wage or above, and it's not somebody else controlling it. A U visa is offered to victims of heinous crimes. There's I think 31 or 32 crimes that can be encompassed under a U visa. Rape, kidnapping, carjacking, sexual assaults, things like that. If you're a victim of that, you would do continued presence until you have an attorney that can apply for a U visa. And a T visa is a trafficking visa. If you're a victim of human trafficking, we do continued presence first. And then T visa is done usually within 18 months, and that also gives you legal authorization to work, gives you benefits, it can get you medical care. So there are services for victims, and I keep reiterating this because people are afraid to come forward, but with you guys being the new faces of this world, this is super important to know and remember, because you'll have the ability to provide this information to people that you're working with. I also do referrals for therapy, medical services, drug and alcohol housing. I do court accompaniment, court preparation, transportation, victim impact statements, and we also have financial assistance that's available. These are helpful tips. The blue campaign I told you was in the very beginning, that's the link. If you ever, Department of Homeland Security has our own page on human trafficking. The Players Project is a really good outlet and resource for anybody who's a victim of human trafficking or child exploitation. And then Shared Hope Org is one of our non-governmental assistance offices that provide hope and healing to our victims and work very closely, like, along us. How am I doing with time? That's my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me at any time. You want to run something by me, you want to talk about something, you want to figure out, you know, I'm a resource. I can be available, shoot me a text, email me. Lauren is on the career panel, she'll be doing it, but this is her information as well. I've just added on there so you guys have it. I think that's it. Any questions? I was like, how does this work? Andy, do you have the microphone?
Oh, Andy has the microphone.
Andy has the microphone.
So if you have any questions, raise your hand. Andy's gonna walk around. Andy will walk around and bring the microphone.
Good morning, and I would like to say thank you so much for that beautiful presentation. I wanted to ask a question. You talked about the male pimps or the handlers that come into the hospital. With the rise now of having madams and female pimps or female handlers that are being as ruthless as the male handlers, are there any stark differences that you can share with us so we can know the signs? Because I know sometimes that females recruit them in by having a mother figure, but then they turn out to be just as ruthless as the male one. So is there any tips that you would have that we would look forward to so we can see the differences between maybe a male and female handler or a pimp?
Yes, that's a really good question, and I will say that sometimes the female handlers for pimps are actually worse than the males. One thing that I will say with females is they'll often say it's like my god sister, my god cousin, my godmother, my grandma, my aunt. I know that this sounds like funny, but be like, oh, so like how y'all related? Like let them answer because they're gonna get choked up. They're definitely gonna get choked up. It's my mom's sister, I'm her dad's aunt. Like and you'll do it together. Another tip that we see is they'll often say like I'm the guardian or I'm the parentis locus, I'm parenting guardian. I mean, and I'm not like show me paperwork, but I'm like, oh, well, how did that happen? Like, was that through, like, how'd you get to that resolution? Oh, well, they gave me like a notarized letter. I'm like, okay, well, until I talk to the mom who assures that, you'll catch them in like not being able to be consistent with their explanation or statement as to who each person is. Another thing, so per diem, I also work at St. Christopher's Hospital, which is Children's Hospital right here in Philly. It's in North Philadelphia. Their per diem emergency room social worker, and oftentimes it really will be them answering questions for the victim, and that's huge. Like eye contact. I mean, sorry, I'm gonna like look at you, but like I'm looking at you, and Lauren's consistently answering. Like really, I always tell when I'm doing my trainings at the hospitals, like, trust your gut. You're allowed to ask questions. We see something, we say something. You are an adult, they are, and this is in child situations, or even if it's an adult victim that comes in, you're allowed to ask questions. I mean, not in an accusatory way, but you are allowed to trust your gut and ask the questions. If that makes them uncomfortable, then they're probably not telling the truth.
Thank you. Yep.
Hello, my name is Tamia. I'm actually a Philly native. I was going to ask if you guys got on top of the hotspot areas in which they do traffic. I went to school in the city around Broadensburg Garden, and I know that there was a lot of people, typically like younger girls, who would, solicit girls to, skip school and hang out with them. And I know that that was like a really big problem when I was there around like 2020 to 2024. So I don't know if you even knew about it, but how would you address that?
So, where'd you go, FLC?
No, I went to Parkway Center City.
Oh, gosh. So, when you say Broad and Spring Garden, if you recall correctly, when I said to you they sit outside of group home and shelters, the youth emergency shelter is at Broad and Fairmount. So that is why it's a hot spot, and it still remains a hot spot. So I came from DHS. When we were in DHS, we actually partnered up with Philly PD to get the high crime cameras in those areas, because I just couldn't figure out like why we could never get license plates or get car models or figure out like who's picking these kids up when they're getting picked up from like a shelter. So it still definitely is a hot area. The gallery was also super popular. They actually, now it's the fashion district, but they have now put like an ordinance in that kids are not allowed inside there unless they're with a parent, because it was such a high recruiting area.
Oh, I never know that. That's actually really good information. But I'll talk to you later about how they do it. It's not vehicles though.
It's not through what?
It's not vehicles though. They don't transfer the children into vehicles.
Oh, okay. All right, yeah. Come talk to me. Some questions back there.
Other questions? Thank you.
How do you guys point out fraudulent, because there are cases where people don't really know the information at the hospitals, and their parents do come with them to answer the questions.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more
So,
time?
like, how you said the people come with them to the hospital, they answer the questions for them, but what about the cases that are quote-unquote false alarm, because some people might not know the information?
I mean, it's definitely one of our hurdles that we face. I will say that when they come in, if they come into the hospital, like hospital lingo is like frequent flyers. So I guess just from us being like social workers usually called, and not in adult hospitals, this is just for like children's hospitals, but they'll page social work if this kid is often there with STIs and STDs, so it allows us to create a tracking system.
Next question over here.
Hi, I'm Emily. I was thinking about how in the last 10 years, internet-related sex crimes have been really just accelerating in volume, and I'm wondering with AI, how you guys at Homeland Security have been approaching different sex trafficking and how that looks with AI deepfakes, and like what types of different interventions you're taking now that this is such a new thing and it's so rampant, very exponentially growing, what that might look like for you guys.
All right, so remember in the slide when I said don't answer questions, don't act like you know everything? That is definitely, we have a whole team of analysts, so they really do work on that part of it. But I will tell you that in the last at least 3 years, we do victim ID ops, which is a victim identification op. And that is where we try to identify victims. We'll often work at hotels or truck stops, places where they would be coming or frequenting for an exchange of sex or money. And it's not because they get locked up, it's not criminal in any nature, it is victim-based, saying is this a survival mode? What do you need that we can help you? But it is becoming much more difficult to do these victim ID ops because of AI and what we are experiencing now. For example, they'll want to FaceTime with the guy that they're coming to meet first, or they want to see who they're meeting and what the hotel is, or they'll want you to send an Uber or a Lyft for them, which all these things we can't do. So it definitely is making it much more difficult. I will say to you though that we are also super, and Lauren can definitely shimmy in on this if she chooses to, but the dark web is really a hindrance, but we now are at least aware, we've been aware of it, but we've been able to combat it a little bit, I would say, and that's really in hopes of us being able to identify more of our child exploitation victims versus our trafficking victims. But we have come a really long way in identifying child exploitation victims, to the point that one of my agents is knocking on a 31-year-old door today, because he was a victim of child exploitation that many years ago, and we were finally able to identify them. So we don't stop, we just gotta try to learn the ways to keep up.
If it's okay, can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
Are there online only trafficking rings or trafficking kind of centers, if that makes sense, where it's not like you can go to somebody's house when you're in the field and like do an operation that way, but it's primarily online where that's where things are being sold?
So, I mean, if it's being sold, then it would only be pictures or images, right? So yes, I mean, absolutely, and that begins, I mean, when I just talked about the dark web, there's 3 and 4-year-olds being sold on the dark web, their images, their videos. I mean, child exploitation runs hand in hand with trafficking, and a lot of people don't correlate them together. However, it's like one of my biggest things in my exploitation trainings is how well they run together. And I say well using that loosely, but yes, but that would be like exploitation based, and a lot of times, you know, when I talk about Snapchat, I'll just give a quick, like, you think you're talking to a same age peer, you're talking to a 50-year-old Megan's Law offender in Chicago who who's acting like a 14-year-old girl, and you're sending images and videos, and that's being sold right down, that's being traded, sold, and everything right down on the dark web.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great questions at school.
Hi, my name is Angela, and I wanted to know when you spoke about immigration relief. Once the U visa or T visa expires, what's the process? Because I imagine when the case is sold or not, do they have to report the victim, or do they give them an extended visa? What's the process?
So continued presence can continually be, if the victim still is needed here for court and stuff like that, then it'll be extended as long as need be. I always encourage my victims to seek out a pro bono. There are many, there's like Justice Works, there's so many law firms and attorneys NGOs that provide free legal services to victims. So while they're on a continued presence, their attorney should be doing the paperwork for the visas, and then after the visas, they can proceed with legal permanent residence or whatever, green card, whatever status that attorney feels fit. Like I'm not an attorney, so I can't advise on that part of it. But if I do the continued presence and then encourage them to speak to their attorneys about the visas that they will qualify for, and then they take their route into legal permanent residency.
Thank you.
Yep.
Dr. Grant?
Hi.
Raleigh, Durham areas, especially. Now, you have been talking about children who have been victims,
Yes.
but what about your adults? What is the statistics coming out of Philly for adults who are victims of human trafficking?
Okay, so when we say human trafficking, we're saying forced coercion by somebody in control for an adult, right? So there has to be a pimp, a bottom, a madam, someone. I would be lying if I gave you stats. I mean, I can tell you that I myself have been a part of 2 cases, and all of my cases that I work on do not need to go to the federal level because we have task force officers at both city and state levels. So I can tell you since January, I have 2 adult victims in and from Philadelphia that were being forced to do that. I have probably done 100 victim identifications since January in Philadelphia who are adult sex workers and choosing to do that on their own without needing to give their money to anybody else, if that makes sense.
And I ask because our chapter, we've been working with victim advocate group in Raleigh.
Okay.
And SBI agent. And the statistics coming out from that group is that 10% of their victims are adults. And because we know more about children being victimized in that way. And interestingly, we had a panel discussion, and one of the
that's just what we're able to know. And again, like I talked about the barriers, I will say a lot of our victim IDs, despite where they happen throughout the city, come from like Kensington, the Kensington area. So my numbers for IDs are higher, but it's so well known there. So it's not something that's swept under like the rug per se.
Over here, Kyler Yules from St. Bonaventure University. I just had a question about the government shutdown that's going on with Homeland Security right now.
So do I.
Yeah. I was just going to ask if that has any impact on your guys' operations in trafficking or any other like major capacity.
So it does not have an impact on anything that is victim-based. We are considered essential personnel. So we were, regardless of a shutdown or not, because we wouldn't not address like a victim or a crime. When it talks about Homeland Security shutdown, a lot of that has to do with like our support staff. To be honest, there's nobody in my office that is not expected to work. Am I correct with that? That's correct. Yeah, so we're all just working for free right now. It's okay. Yes.
Yes.
Oh, hi, sorry.
I know we talk about like victims and child exploitation. Have you seen like a lot of crimes where like a male was the victim of human trafficking?
Yes, I have. I've not seen a lot, but I have seen some. I will say that males tend to be, there is a higher number of male exploitation victims than there are male trafficking victims. With the exploitation victims of males, and I also talk about this in my exploitation training, is that males are at such a higher rate of suicide because of these exploitation-based offenses. Especially with, we asked about the internet earlier, especially with it now, the internet being like where everything's occurring, they're often being told like their images will be shared if they don't send money. So it also becomes a financial exploitation along with, you know, a sexual exploitation, because they're often told to like send money or their images are going to be shared among their football team or their school page and stuff like that. But there definitely are male victims out there, yes.
My name is Victoria. I'm from California, and I know in our city in Orange County, we have a human trafficking task force. There's also resources on the state level. But my question is, at what point does it become a federal issue regarding, you know, when we have our local departments working towards trafficking, our state departments working on trafficking? At what point does the federal government step into the situation?
So a lot of us are, when you say there's a task force, I'm going to tell you that there's probably people at the federal level, like I'm a part of 3 task force, one for each county, Philadelphia, Montgomery, and Bucks. So they'll decide within. To be honest, it's often looked at like what constitutes the federal statute. A lot of times for federal, you need at least more than one victim, especially in trafficking cases. And like, what would be the outcome, right? Like, as long as he or she gets prosecuted, that's ideal. However, you really also want to, I mean, I'm just going to be honest, like, you want them to get the most time that they can get. So what would be a sentence at a federal, what would be a sentence at a state, and what would be a sentence at a local, and then together, collectively, they'll decide that. But typically that decision is based in uniform because there's members of every, like, level on the task force.
Thank you, Whip. Time for one more question.
Hi, my name is Manisha Palmer, and my question for you is, out of all the cases that you've taken or seen over the years that you've been with Homeland Security, which one really stuck with you?
You said one more question. I will say to you, it's a recent case right now, and it's still ongoing. She was 9 when she met her target, and it was online, Snapchat. And it started out as exploitation, and then he became what we call a traveler. He was going to travel from out of state to her with the agreement that she was going to go meet his friends, and she really thought she was going to like Great Wolf Lodge, which is like a really fun place. And there was multiple men there waiting, and they had all intentions. The grooming was set, the ads were ready, and she was going to be trafficked. She was not, but we honestly Snapchat, a lot of social media platforms will alert when they think something is suspicious, and they did. But he also really had Harriet going for almost a year, had him carving his name into Harriet's new form of mutilation is carving their names into it so that even when the scars heal, there will always be a resemblance. It's better than a tattoo now, what they say. So, and this happened while she was 9 and continued to occur into her 10th birthday.
Special Agent Michelle Ludwig, thank you so much. And thank you for working for free as well.
Thank you. We appreciate that. It'll all come back.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're not worried.
All right, everybody, we're taking just a minute. Don't go anywhere, maybe just stretch or something, and then we're going to go right into how to get hired with law enforcement, something that's on a lot of people's minds. So stand by and just take a very short break.